Hi, I'm Andrew Hayes, the Chair-elect of the UKA Athletes Commission. I'm here in Loughborough a week before the announcement for the world-class programme athletes for both Olympic and Para, otherwise known as lottery funding and lottery funded athletes. And we've got the opportunity today to ask a few questions of our Performance Director, Sara Symington. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about the funding landscape and UKA and UK sport, Sara. Nice easy one to begin with. What is the role of UKA?
Gosh, that's a big question to start off with. I think first and foremost, UKA works very, very collaboratively with the home nations, and we've kind of signed up to Athletics Unified. So that's a really poignant point in time for the sport. But ultimately, from a performance perspective, we're the governing body that selects GB and NI teams, but also we are the ones that oversee the world-class programme.
How does the funding work from there, and what was the process that leads to the funding that eventually comes down to UKA?
Yeah, it's a really, really robust, lengthy process, and rightly so. It's taxpayers' money, and I think we've all got to be mindful of that. So we typically start off 18 to 24 months before any Olympic, Paralympic Games starts, and it's partly a dialogue and a application process, which is within a framework, and they ask us to report and also give a hell of a lot of intel around a performance matrix and standards in our sport, trends on the global stage, the athlete pipeline, our financial status, our staffing structure. So there's a whole host of things they ask within that application, and that process takes typically between 18 and 24 months before we actually submit into UK Sport. They then take it away amongst all the other 48 sports they do fund across the Olympic and Paralympic landscape. And within their, I suppose, financial constraints themselves, they look at what, against their strategic priorities, long-term and short-term, they look at the performance metrics, but also their strategic value going forward, and they make informed decisions based on those conversations, but also that submission. I mean, ultimately, we are measured around purely Olympic and Paralympic success, and that happens once every 4 years. That is the role, or that is the aim of the world-class programme. We are measured against that success. So it is about medals, but winning medals in the right way as well, with integrity. The role of the world-class programme is primarily to help support athletes and this sport, athlete and coach pairings, to develop, learn, and as the athletes move up through the pathway, it might be a very, very discrete area that we might help support, obviously within the constraints of our finances as well. So it's about working with the athlete and coach to identify and target what is going to be the value add that we can add in that relationship and in that particular journey in itself. As a sport, we have to come up with a performance matrix and a selection policy that matches performance standards. APA stands for Athlete Performance Award. Not everyone gets one, unfortunately. We are curtailed and confined and constrained by a certain amount on each programme. So on the Olympic side, we've got 67 places, and on the Paralympic side, we have 48 places. And there's different tiers of APA according to your performance levels. So we have a podium level, podium potential level, and a confirmation level. We then nominate against selection criteria and a performance matrix into UK Sport our individuals that we feel that can ultimately achieve the ambitions of both UK Sport and UK Athletics, i.e. medal success at Paris and LA. And attached alongside that is an athlete medical scheme. So UK Sport actually keep that ring-fence that funding for the APAs and the athlete medical scheme, so that's retained at UK Sport level, and they distribute that accordingly, according to the nominations.
So that's a really interesting point, that funding is ring-fenced. That has to go in that direction rather than anywhere else in the organisation.
Yeah, so it definitely doesn't come to UK Athletics, and what I'd say is the core funding that comes to UK Athletics, again, there's very, very strict criteria and governance around how we spend it.
Yep.
And it has to be spent on those that are nominated and take up those APA places.
So we're aware that certain athletes might be means tested, or there's means tested involved in the APA? Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so there's a certain threshold that athletes can actually earn. So through UK Sport, there's a process whereby they assess that before they actually sign up and release that APA on a monthly basis. So the threshold is £65,000 a year. So for those athletes that do earn more than that, they are means tested out of receiving an APA. However, they do take up a place of an APA, and they would continue to receive that medical insurance, plus have the opportunities to them with regards training camps, events, and other services that we might be able to offer them.
So moving outside of the sort of world-class performance and the Olympic level athletes, we're obviously at GB Northern Ireland are very successful at things such as the European Cross. We've got some phenomenal athletes that aren't Olympic events. Where does the funding come for those competitions, those non-Olympic, non-para competitions?
So that primarily comes from UK athletics, whether it's from their reserves and or particular sponsorship and commercial revenues that come into the organisation. I think it's a really exciting space for the organisation going forward. It's about perhaps looking at some opportunities there, particularly for this side of the sport. But typically how it operates is on an annual basis. We look at what events are coming up, the destinations and locations which obviously attach differing levels of support and costs attached to it, and we kind of come with what we can afford ultimately and distribute it accordingly.
So there's challenges there in terms of this isn't a bottomless pit of cash that UK can spend on things. There's certain things are ring fenced. What do you see as the main challenges as performance director in terms of funding?
Continued success on the Olympic and Paralympic landscape, that has to be one of our primary ambitions. We have to continue to deliver against our milestone targets and the goals and targets that we sign up to with UK Sport. But ultimately, I suppose also growing the sport and increasing and elevating the profile of the other events, because I think there's some really exciting parts of the sport that probably don't quite get the recognition they deserve. And you can sort of see off-road trail running, having sampled one or two myself, it's a really exciting proposition for individuals but for the sport.
So looking forward to sort of next week's announcement with the funding of the Olympic and Para, can you tell me about what's involved in how you come to those decisions? Because it must be quite a challenge.
Oh, it is. Listen, I've just said we've got 67 places on Olympic and 48 on Paralympic. We have to be really, there's an inordinate amount of work before we walk into that room, is how I describe it first and foremost. We do capture a lot of data. So we've got a system called Torch, which PwC have very kindly helped build in the last 18-24 months in terms of collating all the individual data, but also looking at world trends and where the particular events are going. So we kind of utilise that, but also the experts in the room. So there's event leads that bring that intel and context to the performances that have happened. We also work closely and also publish a selection document months out in terms of criteria. So we kind of have a host of athletes that have hit certain criteria against those that are currently on the world class. And I think through an informed process, and on the Olympic side, to give an example, it takes 2 days to work through all the different permutations around, for the limited amount of spaces, who is going to be best placed to be able to kind of move forward. It's looking at ceiling level, trajectories, a whole host of information.
Can you tell me a little bit about what happens when an athlete leaves the APA or the world-class programme?
Yeah, so we've kind of refined this over the years, and it's very much about, there's always going to be an exit interview, because we're really keen to understand from both sides the experience that athlete has had, but ultimately what support we can put in place. So as an example, the athlete medical scheme would be elongated if there's a injury that still needs to be looked after. We also offer services into performance lifestyle and a transition period of up to 3 to 6 months. And then if there is any priority services that particular athlete we feel is pertinent in that transition out of the programme, that would be a sort of conversation with the individual.